Mira sat near the edge of a steep hill, her glowing blue eyes fixed on the twin moons hanging in the dark sky. The wind carried the soft hum of the forest, but Mira barely noticed. Her wheelchair creaked slightly as she shifted, the sound breaking the quiet. It was a constant reminder of what she had lost. Once, Mira had been one of the fastest runners in her village. Her strong legs had carried her across the wide plains, through the glowing crystal fields, and up the steepest cliffs. But that was before the accident. Now her legs were nothing more than dead weight, and the dreams of adventure she had once held seemed as unreachable as the stars. She clenched her fists, her sharp claws digging into her palms. The accident wasn't her fault, she told herself for the 100th time. But that didn't matter. Her friends had slowly stopped visiting, and the people in her village had begun to look at her with pity. Mira hated that look more than anything. "Mira. Hey, Mira." A cheerful voice called out, breaking her thoughts. She turned her head sharply, annoyed at the interruption. It was Ethan, the human who had crash-landed on her planet years ago. He was tall and lanky, with messy brown hair and a face that was always smeared with grease. He was dragging a cart loaded with strange gadgets, and his usual grin stretched across his face. "What do you want, Ethan?" Mira snapped, turning her chair away. Ethan didn't seem bothered by her tone. He parked his cart and sat down on a nearby rock, brushing his hands on his already dirty pants. "You looked like you needed company," he said casually, his tone as light as the breeze. "I didn't," she shot back, glaring at him. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know, when I first crashed here, I thought I'd never walk again either. My ship was wrecked, and I was stranded on an alien planet. But then I built something amazing." Mira rolled her eyes. "This again. Your stories don't work on me, Ethan." But Ethan wasn't deterred. "It's not just a story. Look," he said, tapping his knee. Mira noticed a faint metallic sheen as he lifted his pant leg to reveal a robotic joint. "I built this leg myself after the crash. Took me months, but it's why I'm walking now." For a moment, Mira couldn't hide her curiosity. She had never noticed the artificial leg before. But she quickly masked her interest with a scowl. "Good for you. I'm not you." Ethan chuckled. "True, you're faster, stronger, and way cooler than I could ever be." Mira snorted, despite herself. "Not anymore." Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "What if you could be?" he asked, his tone suddenly serious. Mira froze. She didn't like where this conversation was heading. "Don't start." "I'm serious," Ethan said, standing up. He pointed to his cart, where strange metal parts and wires were piled haphazardly. "I've been working on something. Legs. Not just ordinary legs, but legs that could let you do more than you ever could before. Jump higher, run faster, climb anything. You'd be unstoppable." Mira stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You're joking," she said flatly. "I'm not," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "But I can't do it alone. I need your help. You know this planet better than I do. Together, we could build something incredible." Mira's claws dug into the armrests of her wheelchair. The offer was tempting, but it sounded too good to be true. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "What's in it for you?" Ethan shrugged. "I like building things, and I know what it's like to feel stuck. Besides, I think you deserve a second chance." The sincerity in his voice made Mira look away. She didn't want to admit it, but his words struck a chord deep within her. For a long moment, she said nothing, staring at the distant moons. Finally, she spoke. "Even if I said yes, it wouldn't work. You don't have the materials, and the tech here is nothing like Earth's." Ethan grinned, the kind of grin that made it clear he thrived on challenges. "Then we'll find what we need, even if it means going to the ends of this planet." Mira turned her chair to face him, her expression hard. "You don't know what you're asking. The places where we'd need to go, they're dangerous. So am I, Ethan said, his grin turning mischievous. Mira sighed, rubbing her temples. The idea was ridiculous, impossible. But as she looked at Ethan's determined face, something stirred inside her, a faint flicker of hope. Fine, she said at last. One chance, but if you mess this up, I'm not helping you again. Ethan extended a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Mira took it. Deal, he said with a smile. As they shook hands, the stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter. The impossible design. Ethan's workshop hummed with life. Machines whirred, gears clicked, and a faint smell of burning metal filled the air. On one cluttered table, a mechanical bird flapped its wings, chirping as it tried to take off, but wobbled and fell flat. Ethan caught it mid-air, muttering, "You're getting there, buddy," before placing it back on the shelf. Mira stepped cautiously into the chaos. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on contraptions that seemed to serve no clear purpose. The metallic cube spun in circles on one table. On another, a half-finished robotic arm twitched as though alive. The air was thick with a mix of frustration and inspiration. "You live in this mess?" Mira asked, wrinkling her nose. Ethan spun around, grinning as though her words were a compliment. "Every masterpiece begins with a mess," he said, motioning her to sit by a cluttered workbench. Mira didn't sit. Instead, she crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, her tail flicking behind her. "So, what's this big plan of yours?" Ethan grabbed a sheet of paper, smudged with grease, and spread it out on the table. The crude sketch showed a pair of legs, mechanical but sleek, with notes scribbled in every corner. "These," he said, pointing to the sketch, "aren't just legs. They're an extension of you. They'll respond to your thoughts, move with your instincts, and give you more power than you ever had before." Mira raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "That's just a drawing. Where's the proof it'll work?" Ethan held up a finger and dashed to a corner of the room. He returned with what looked like a metallic exoskeleton, small enough to fit a doll. "Prototype," he said proudly. "Watch." He placed it on the table, attached a wire to it, and flipped a switch. The tiny legs twitched, then straightened. They took one step, then another, walking clumsily across the table. Mira's eyes widened despite herself. "It's not bad," she admitted, though her tone was cautious. "But how do you plan to scale that up? This planet doesn't have advanced tech like Earth." "Ah," Ethan said, tapping the side of his head. "That's where you come in. I need a rare alloy called zeranium. It's strong but light, perfect for building the frame." Mira's tail froze mid-flick. "Zeranium," she repeated, her voice sharp. "You know where that's found, right?" Ethan nodded, his grin unwavering. "The wastelands." Mira laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You're insane. The wastelands are crawling with drones and worse. People don't come back from there." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "But you know the paths, don't you?" Mira glared at him. "I do, but that doesn't mean I'm going." Ethan stood and walked over to her, his expression softening. "Mira, you said you'd give this one chance. This is it. Zeranium is the key. Without it, we can't build the legs. And if we can't build the legs—" He gestured to her wheelchair, leaving the thought unfinished. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint whirring of the mechanical bird on the shelf. Mira's claws tapped rhythmically against the armrests of her chair. Her mind raced, weighing the risks against the hope that had been flickering inside her since yesterday. Finally, she sighed, defeated. "If we do this, you follow my lead. One wrong step, and the drones will tear us apart." Ethan saluted with a mock-serious expression. "Yes, Mom." Mira rolled her eyes but couldn't help the small smirk tugging at her lips. "Don't make me regret this, human." Into the wastelands. The sky above the wastelands was an eerie shade of gray, the kind that whispered of danger. Dust swirled in the wind, carrying the faint metallic tang of decay. Mira adjusted her cloak, the fabric wrapped tightly around her to shield against the biting air. Beside her, Ethan trudged forward, pushing a hover cart packed with tools and gadgets, its faint hum the only sound in the stillness. "This place feels alive," Ethan muttered, glancing around nervously. His eyes flicked toward the towering, jagged ruins scattered across the cracked ground. "I don't like it." "Good," Mira replied, her voice low. "You shouldn't. The wastelands don't like visitors." Ethan chuckled, but the sound lacked humor. "Cheery place. Perfect for a scavenger hunt." Mira didn't respond. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon, searching for movement. The wastelands weren't just abandoned ruins. They were a graveyard. Long ago, it had been a bustling city of her people. But after the war, it was left to rot, guarded by ancient defense systems and deadly drones. "Stay close," Mira warned, her tail flicking behind her. "If a drone spots us, don't run. You won't outrun them." "Noted," Ethan said, gripping a small device strapped to his belt. It blinked green, a signal that the air was clear for now. As they moved deeper into the wastelands, the silence grew heavier, pressing down like a physical weight. The ruins loomed larger, their jagged edges like broken teeth reaching for the sky. Mira led the way, her wheelchair's hover function gliding smoothly over the uneven terrain. "You never told me why you're so familiar with this place," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the silence. Mira hesitated, her fingers tightening on the controls. "I used to come here with my father," she said finally, "before it became this. He was an explorer, always searching for things left behind by the old world. He taught me the paths, the safe zones, but even he wouldn't come here now." Ethan glanced at her, sensing the weight behind her words. "I'm sorry." Mira shrugged, keeping her gaze fixed ahead. "Don't be. Just stay quiet and keep up." They rounded a corner, and the sight before them made Ethan stop in his tracks. A massive structure rose from the ground, its surface glinting faintly in the dim light. It was an ancient power plant, its outer walls scarred and broken, but still standing. "That's where we'll find the Zeranium," Mira said, pointing to the structure. "The drones patrol inside. They'll attack anything that moves." "Great," Ethan muttered, pulling out a small device from his cart. It was a spherical drone of his own design, no bigger than his fist. He tapped a button, and it floated into the air, emitting a soft hum. "What's that?" Mira asked, narrowing her eyes. "A scout," Ethan said. "It can map the area and tag the drones so we can avoid them." Mira frowned. "And if it gets spotted?" Ethan grinned. "Then we run." "Fantastic plan," Mira said dryly. The small drone zipped toward the structure, its blinking light barely visible in the gloom. Ethan watched the feed on a small screen strapped to his wrist, his brow furrowing as lines and shapes appeared. "There are at least 5 drones patrolling the main floor," he said. "We'll have to be quick. The Zeranium is likely in the core chamber." Mira sighed. "Of course it is." They moved closer to the building, keeping to the shadows. Mira's heart pounded in her chest, her claws twitching with nervous energy. The hum of the ancient defense drones grew louder, a low, menacing sound that sent chills down her spine. As they reached the entrance, a sharp noise broke the silence, a metallic clank, echoing through the ruins. Mira froze, her ears twitching. What was that? Ethan's eyes widened as his wrist screen lit up red. One of the drones just spotted something. "Something," Mira hissed. "Or someone." Before Ethan could answer, the sound of whirring blades filled the air. A drone appeared around the corner, its glowing red eyes locked on them. It let out a sharp mechanical screech, and a beam of light shot toward the ground at their feet. "Run," Mira shouted, yanking her hover chair controls and veering to the side. Ethan bolted after her, dragging the cart as more drones swarmed into view, their eyes glowing like angry embers. The ruins echoed with their mechanical shrieks, the sound bouncing off the walls like a chorus of alarms. They darted into a narrow passage, Mira's chair barely fitting through the crumbling gap. Behind them, the drone's beams scorched the ground, the heat singeing Ethan's arm as he dove behind cover. "We can't outrun them for long," Ethan yelled. "We don't have to," Mira shot back, her eyes locking onto a pile of debris. She aimed her wrist device, firing a small pulse that sent the rubble crashing down, blocking the path behind them. The drones screeched in frustration, their lights flickering as they searched for another route. "Nice shot," Ethan panted, leaning against the wall. Mira smirked, though her hands trembled. "Don't get used to it." The heart of the machine. The chamber was vast, its walls shimmering with faint golden veins of energy that pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Ethan and Mira stood at the threshold, their breaths shallow, the silence around them deafening. The air inside was heavy, almost alive, and the faint hum of ancient machinery vibrated through the floor. "This isn't just a power plant," Mira said, her voice barely a whisper. Her sharp eyes traced the lines of energy that wove across the room, all converging on a single object at the center, a glowing orb suspended in midair. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching softly on the cracked floor. "It's a power core," he murmured, awe creeping into his voice. "And it's still active after all these years." The orb pulsed faintly, its light illuminating the dozens of dormant drones lining the chamber walls. Their sleek, metallic bodies gleamed under the light, their red eyes dim but menacing. "I don't like this," Mira muttered, gripping the armrests of her hover chair. Her claws tapped anxiously against the controls. "This place feels wrong." Ethan knelt near the edge of the platform that surrounded the core. The zeranium he needed was embedded in the base, its silvery glint unmistakable. "This is it," he said, glancing back at Mira. "This is what we came for." Mira stayed at the doorway, her tail flicking nervously. "Then grab it, and let's get out of here. The longer we stay, the more likely those drones wake up." Ethan reached into his tool pouch, pulling out a small plasma cutter. As he started working, the glow of the core intensified slightly, its hum growing louder. The veins in the walls pulsed faster, like an alarm system coming to life. "Ethan," Mira said sharply, her voice cutting through the growing noise. "Stop, something's happening." "I just need a few more seconds," Ethan replied, sweat beading on his forehead. The cutter hissed and sparked as it sliced through the zeranium base. Mira's sharp hearing picked up a faint clicking sound, rhythmic and deliberate. Her eyes darted toward the drones lining the walls. Their red eyes, once dormant, flickered faintly. "Ethan," she barked. "They're waking up." Ethan cursed under his breath, doubling his pace. Almost there. The first drone twitched, its limbs jerking to life with mechanical precision. Its head turned toward them, its red eyes locking on. A sharp, piercing screech echoed through the chamber, and suddenly, all the drones were moving. Mira didn't hesitate. She slammed her hover chair into high gear, speeding toward Ethan. "We need to go, now." Ethan yanked the piece of zeranium free just as Mira reached him. He threw himself onto her hover chair platform, clutching the metal tightly. "Go, go, go." The drones were fully active now, their sleek forms detaching from the walls and swarming toward the core. Beams of red light shot from their weapons, scorching the floor inches from Mira's chair. She veered sharply, dodging the attacks as Ethan scrambled to secure the zeranium in the cart strapped to the back. "Hold on," Mira shouted as she accelerated toward the exit. The chamber was alive with chaos, the hum of the core now a deafening roar. As they raced through the narrow corridor, the drones followed relentlessly, their metallic screeches echoing through the ruins. "They're gaining on us," Ethan yelled, glancing over his shoulder. He grabbed a small explosive device from his belt and hurled it behind them. The explosion sent a shockwave through the corridor, collapsing part of the ceiling and slowing the drones. "Nice shot," Mira said, her voice strained. "But we're not out yet." The exit was in sight, the faint light of the wastelands spilling through the jagged opening. Mira pushed the chair to its limits, the hover engine whining under the strain. Just as they reached the threshold, a drone swooped ahead, blocking their path. Its red eyes glowed menacingly, and it raised its weapon. Mira's heart pounded as she reached for her wrist device, firing an EMP pulse. The drone spasmed, its systems glitching long enough for Ethan to leap forward and shove it aside. They burst out into the open, the cool air of the wastelands, a stark contrast to the heat of the chamber. Mira didn't slow down, racing toward a rocky outcrop for cover. The drones hesitated at the edge of the ruins, their programming seemingly unwilling to leave the ancient structure. When they finally stopped, Mira and Ethan collapsed under the outcrop, gasping for breath. Ethan held up the Zeranium, grinning despite the chaos. "We did it," he said between breaths. Mira glared at him, her scales shimmering faintly under the light. "You almost got us killed." "But we didn't die," Ethan replied with a weak laugh. "And now, we've got what we need." Mira shook her head, but she couldn't hide the small smirk tugging at her lips. "You're insane, human. But maybe, just maybe, this will be worth it." Trial by fire. The workshop was a cacophony of sparks, hissing steam, and the rapid clatter of tools as Ethan worked furiously. The Zeranium frame for the robotic legs gleamed under the flickering light, its surface reflecting the faint blue glow of the stabilizer core embedded within. Every screw and joint seemed to hum with potential, but there was also tension in the air, as if the machinery itself could sense the stakes. Mira sat nearby, watching as Ethan tinkered with the final adjustments. Her tail flicked impatiently, and her sharp claws tapped a restless rhythm against the armrest of her hover chair. "You've been at this for hours," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Are you sure it's ready?" Ethan didn't look up, his hand steady, but his voice edged with exhaustion. "It's not just ready, it's perfect. Well, mostly perfect." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Mostly." He grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Come on, Mira. Where's the fun in perfection without a little risk?" "That's the most human thing I've ever heard," she muttered, rolling her eyes. Ethan stepped back, finally setting his tools down. He gestured toward the legs, which now stood upright on a support rack. They were sleek and powerful, with a blend of alien elegance and human ingenuity. The joints shimmered faintly, charged with energy from the core. "All right," Ethan said, clapping his hands together. "Moment of truth. You ready?" Mira hesitated, her sharp eyes narrowing as she studied the legs. They looked incredible, far beyond what she had expected. But there was a knot of doubt in her chest. What if they didn't work? Worse, what if they failed spectacularly? "I'm not sure this is a good idea," she admitted, her voice softer than usual. Ethan crouched down to her level, his expression serious. "Mira, you've faced drones, storms, and who knows what else out there. This is just another step forward. Literally." Mira smirked despite herself. "You really think these will work?" "I don't think," Ethan said confidently. "I know. But we'll never know for sure unless you try." Taking a deep breath, Mira nodded. "Fine. Let's do this." The first step. With Ethan's help, Mira carefully slid her legs into the mechanical frame. The metal adjusted automatically, wrapping around her like a second skin. Tiny needles pierced her scales, connecting the frame's neural interface directly to her nervous system. The sensation was strange, like a faint hum vibrating through her body. "How does it feel?" Ethan asked, watching her closely. "Strange," Mira replied, flexing her claws. She could feel the legs responding to her thoughts, like an extension of her body, but heavier, more deliberate. "All right," Ethan said, stepping back and flipping a switch on the control panel. The legs hummed to life, their energy coursing visibly through the Zeranium joints. "Try standing." Mira hesitated, then leaned forward, pushing herself off the chair. For the first time since her accident, her feet touched the ground, and she felt the weight of her body shift onto her legs. Slowly, shakily, she straightened. "I'm standing," she whispered, disbelief and wonder filling her voice. Ethan grinned like a proud parent. "Told you." But the moment was short-lived. As Mira took her first step, a sharp jolt of energy shot through the legs, making her stumble. She caught herself against the table, her claws digging into the wood. "Ethan, what's happening?" she demanded. The control panel sparked, and Ethan's grin vanished. The stabilizer core. It's overloading. Chaos unleashed. The room was suddenly filled with a high-pitched whine as the energy from the core surged uncontrollably. The legs twitched violently, threatening to throw Mira off balance. Ethan rushed to the panel, frantically pressing buttons and flipping switches. "Shut it down," Mira yelled, struggling to keep upright. Her tail lashed as she fought to stay steady. "I'm trying," Ethan shouted back, sweat dripping down his face. "It's not responding." Mira's heart raced as the energy surged again, this time shooting through her body like fire. She cried out, falling to one knee. The room blurred around her, and for a moment she thought the legs might tear her apart. But then something changed. Through the chaos, Mira felt a strange connection. The legs stopped fighting her, their violent jerks softening into a steady hum. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes and focusing. Slowly, she stood again, this time with more control. "It's not the core," she said through gritted teeth. "It's me. I have to sync with it." Ethan looked at her, his hands frozen mid-motion. "What do you mean?" "The legs aren't just machines," Mira said, taking a tentative step forward. "They're connected to me. If I fight them, they'll fight back." She took another step, this one more confident. The energy coursed through her, powerful, but no longer overwhelming. A third step, then a fourth. Soon, Mira was walking across the workshop, the legs moving in perfect harmony with her thoughts. Ethan stared in awe. "You did it." "No," Mira said, stopping to face him. She smirked, a glint of pride in her glowing eyes. "We did it." The final race. The first warning was the sound. A low, distant rumble, like a storm rolling across the wastelands. Mira stood at the edge of Ethan's workshop, the new robotic legs humming softly as she shifted her weight. The cool night air brushed against her scales, but it did little to calm the heat of adrenaline rushing through her veins. "What is that?" she asked, her voice sharp. Her glowing eyes scanned the horizon, but the darkness gave nothing away. Ethan appeared beside her, clutching a handheld scanner that beeped erratically. "It's not good," he said, his face pale. Something picked up the energy surge from the stabilizer core. "Whatever it is, it's big, and it's heading straight for us." Mira flexed her claws, the metallic joints of her legs clicking faintly as she shifted into a ready stance. "How much time do we have?" Ethan didn't look up, his fingers dancing across the scanner's screen. "Minutes. Maybe less." The rumble grew louder, shaking the ground beneath them. Mira turned to Ethan, her expression fierce. "If we stay here, we're dead. We need to move." Ethan hesitated, glancing back at his. The Sentinel was relentless, its massive frame crashing through the rocky terrain with ease. Red laser beams shot from its eyes, scorching the ground in front of them and forcing Mira to dodge with quick, precise movements. Each step she took felt like a test, the new legs responding to her commands with a level of precision she hadn't fully mastered yet. "Head for the canyon," Ethan shouted, pointing to a narrow pass ahead. "It's too big to follow us through there." Mira didn't question him. She adjusted her course, the robotic legs powering her up a steep incline toward the canyon. Behind them, the Sentinel roared again, its claws tearing through the landscape as it gained speed. A test of trust. As they neared the canyon's edge, Mira glanced back to see the Sentinel charging at full speed. "It's not stopping," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "It's going to try and collapse the pass." Ethan fumbled with the bag slung over his shoulder, pulling out a small spherical device. Then we'll collapse it first. Mira's eyes widened. You're carrying a detonator. Of course, Ethan said, his grin strained. I never leave home without a few surprises. They reached the canyon's entrance, the narrow walls towering above them. Mira turned sharply, planting herself in front of the pass. You said it. I'll hold it off. Are you insane? Ethan yelled, staring at her as if she'd grown a second head. That thing will tear you apart. Mira's lips curled into a defiant smile. Not if I tear it apart first. Before Ethan could argue, she leaped forward, her legs propelling her high into the air. The sentinel reared back, surprised by her sudden attack. Mira landed on its massive arm, her claws digging into the metal as she climbed toward its head. The sentinel thrashed, trying to shake her off, but the new legs gave Mira an edge. She moved with a speed and precision she had never experienced before, dodging its attacks as she targeted the glowing red core on its chest. Any time now, Ethan, she shouted, gripping tightly as the sentinel's arm swung dangerously close to the canyon wall. Ethan scrambled to set the charges, his hands shaking as he worked. Almost there. The narrow escape. Mira spotted an exposed cable near the core and slashed at it with her claws. Sparks flew, and the sentinel let out a distorted roar, its movements becoming erratic. It stumbled backward, giving Mira the opening she needed. She leaped off, landing gracefully on the ground just as Ethan finished arming the detonator. Run, he yelled, grabbing her arm as they sprinted deeper into the canyon. The sentinel recovered quickly, its massive frame barreling toward them. But it was too late. Ethan pressed the detonator, and the canyon walls erupted in a deafening explosion. Rocks tumbled down, burying the sentinel in a cloud of dust and debris. Mira and Ethan collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as the rumble of falling rocks subsided. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the only sound their labored breathing. Did we get it? Ethan asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Mira sat up, her glowing eyes scanning the rubble. The sentinel's red lights were nowhere to be seen. For now, she said, her tone cautious. But that was just one. There could be more. Freedom in the stars. The world around them was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that settled after chaos. Dust from the collapsed canyon still hung in the air, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Mira stood at the edge of the rubble, her robotic legs humming softly as she shifted her weight. Every movement felt more natural now, as if the legs were truly a part of her. Ethan leaned against a jagged rock, clutching his scanner with trembling hands. The screen flashed red, a steady beeping cutting through the silence. Mira, he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. It's not over. The signal, it's still active. Mira turned toward him, her sharp eyes narrowing. What do you mean? We buried that thing. Ethan shook his head, his expression grim. The core in your legs, it's doing more than powering them. It's sending out a beacon. And whatever's out there, it's coming for you. For a moment, Mira said nothing. She looked down at her legs, their sleek metal glinting in the faint light. They had given her so much. Freedom, strength, hope. But now, they had made her a target. I'm not running, she said firmly, her voice steady. Not anymore. Ethan's eyes widened. Mira, you don't understand. This isn't just a sentinel or a drone. This is something bigger. If we stay, we don't stand a chance. Then we make a stand, Mira replied, her claws flexing. I'm not going back to that chair, Ethan. Not after everything we've been through. The final stand. The horizon began to glow, a faint red light spreading like fire across the night sky. Mira and Ethan stood at the edge of the canyon, watching as massive shadows appeared in the distance. Ships, sleek, angular, and bristling with weapons, descended from the clouds, their engines roaring like thunder. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. We can't fight them, Mira. But maybe we can outrun them. How? Mira asked, her voice sharp. "They're faster, stronger, and they have the tech to track me." Ethan turned to her, his expression suddenly alive with an idea. "My ship." Mira frowned. "Your ship? The one you crashed here years ago?" "It's not as wrecked as you think," Ethan said, a small grin forming. "I've been fixing it for years, piece by piece. It's not perfect, but it might just get us off this planet." Mira hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. Leaving her planet meant abandoning everything she knew, but staying meant certain death. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Where is it?" Ethan pointed toward a jagged peak in the distance, about 2 clicks that way. "If we can make it, we have a chance." A race against time. The two of them moved quickly, Mira's new legs allowing her to cover ground faster than ever. Ethan struggled to keep up, but Mira slowed just enough to help him along. Behind them, the ships closed in, beams of light scanning the ground for their targets. "We're almost there," Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. As they crested the final hill, the wreckage of Ethan's ship came into view. It was a battered patchwork creation, its hull covered in mismatched panels and exposed wires. But it was intact, and its engines glowed faintly with power. "It flies?" Mira asked, disbelief coloring her tone. "Only just," Ethan admitted, sprinting toward the ship. "Get in, and let's find out." Mira followed him into the cramped cockpit, the interior a chaotic mess of wires, switches, and screens. Ethan dropped into the pilot's seat, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "Hold on," he yelled as the engines roared to life. The ship lurched forward, rising unsteadily into the air. Mira gripped the sides of her seat, her heart racing as the ground fell away beneath them. The pursuing ship spotted them immediately, their red beams locking onto the small craft. "They're firing," Mira shouted as the cockpit lit up with warning lights. "I see it," Ethan yelled back, yanking the controls hard. The ship veered sharply, dodging the first volley of laser fire. The hull groaned under the strain, but Ethan kept it steady, pushing the engines to their limit. Freedom in the stars. The sky above was a chaotic dance of light and shadow, the pursuing ships closing in as Ethan piloted through the turbulence. Mira's claws dug into her seat as she watched the distance between them shrink. "We're not going to make it," she shouted. "Yes, we will," Ethan replied, his voice filled with determination. He flipped a switch, and the ship's thrusters roared to full power. "Come on, baby, just a little more." The ship broke through the upper atmosphere, the stars above blazing into view, but the pursuing ships weren't giving up. One fired a direct hit, and the cockpit shook violently as alarms blared. "We're losing power," Ethan said, his voice tight with frustration. "Mira, the stabilizer core. It's the only thing strong enough to keep us moving." Mira froze, understanding the weight of his words. Removing the core meant giving up her legs, her newfound freedom. But without it, they were as good as dead. She met Ethan's gaze, her voice steady. "Do it." "Mira." "No," Ethan began, but she cut him off. "It's just metal," she said, her glowing eyes fierce. "Freedom isn't about legs. It's about choice. Now hurry." Ethan hesitated only a moment before pulling the stabilizer core from the legs. The energy surged into the ship's systems, and the engines roared to life with renewed power. The ship shot forward, leaving the pursuing vessels behind as it broke into the vast, endless expanse of space.